I recognize the honourable member from Dartmouth South.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the member for Bedford South, for taking us on a tour of history and democracy. And I think it is quite directly germane to the conversation we're having, that tour. And I will, believe it or not, keep my remarks a bit short on this amendment, but I did want to make sure to say a few words. The beginning of this amendment mentions the Election Commission. And I don't know if the government was aware that we have an Elections Commission, but we do. And that Elections Commission is an all-party commission that exists to give feedback on the conduct of elections and issues relating to elections. And it is a unusual but really good example of the way actually that parties can all have feedback together on non-partisan issues behind the scenes. Because fundamentally, an election, the conduct of an election, not only is or should be nonpartisan, but must be nonpartisan. It must be. If there is a whiff of partisanship in the conduct of an election, then we're all in much bigger trouble than we might think. And so it is because of this that it's very troubling to know that not only did the minister, the premier, even the chief electoral officer, as far as we understand, not take the time to have a conversation with the Elections Commission about this bill, but that, and I'll table this letter, but that our understanding is that in fact when the Elections Commission met on October 7th, this was after this government took office, they were told that Elections Nova Scotia would be facilitating a jurisdictional scan of best practices, e.g., and I'm quoting, spring versus fall. Spring versus fall, day versus period of time. Nowhere, at no point was the Elections Commission told that summer was in the offing, that summer was even being considered. And if they had been told, I can tell the members of this chamber that beyond the shadow of a doubt, they would have said that is the, I mean, they would have probably said it more politely than me because that's a challenge I have, but they would have said something to the effect of, that doesn't seem like a very good idea, because as we've been discussing for the past several days, it just so plainly is a terrible idea. And as I said, I'll speak more to why that's such a terrible idea, you know, through the course of this debate. But again, you know, lest one of the members of the government try to get up and talk to us about how great fixed election dates are, don't bother. We know. Fixed election dates are good, but with this bill, the government is fixing one thing and breaking another. And it's a very strange, I would say, and puzzling, and I mean this genuinely, precedent to set in the first session of the first mandate of a government. Why you would want to go forward with a important and brave and wanted change, which is fixed election dates. Kudos from everyone to the government for doing that, but why? Why would we do July? And I think it bears repeating that notwithstanding the number of times that those of us in this chamber have asked this question, we have yet to get anything that resembles an answer. We just don't get an answer. So let me just try out some of the things I've heard. So we can use schools. That's one of the answers we've been given. We can use schools. Well, as I said in second reading, that is simply not the case in most of HRM. Our schools are full. They're doing maintenance in the summertime. We didn't have a single polling place in a school. Most of the members I've spoken to didn't. In rural Nova Scotia, no doubt, you can use some schools. But again, the government's argument is we need fixed election dates so we can plan. With 4 years, I'm pretty sure we can all find polling places. I don't think they need to be schools. I really, again, is that true? Maybe. Is it a reason to legislate July election dates forever? I mean, it's kind of absurd. The other thing is, it's easier for teachers to run. And I want to be careful because I was the education critic for 4 years. I have 3 children in school. I have endless respect for teachers. I have gone to bat for them on the floor of this House many times. But we have a lot of teachers in the legislature. We have a lot of teachers in the legislature because it's already more possible for teachers to run than most other professions. Again, will it make it easier for teachers to run? Maybe. Is that a reason to legislate July elections forever? No, it isn't. I'm sorry. And I want to go back to this civics conversation again for a minute. The member for Dartmouth South, or Bedford South, I hope he doesn't take my job, spoke at length about the civics program, the poll that was released yesterday. I'm sure we'll talk about it again, but I want to say that I didn't participate in a civics program. I wasn't a teacher, so I didn't run a civics program. I also wasn't a very conscientious student. So I was a good student. But I was also kind of a bad kid. So I didn't do a lot of the things in school. I wasn't in student government. I didn't participate in mock elections. I didn't do that stuff. I was hanging out on the playground with my friends. I was getting into trouble. I was doing different things. And those things made me the person I am today. And I don't regret, je ne regrette rien. But but you know, I mean, we all move through life in different ways. But what I will say is I would have loved a program like civics because I am a person who has a natural interest in politics. I was a political science major in university. I figured it out later. But it actually took me a really long time to get there. And so I wasn't volunteering on political campaigns. I wasn't engaged in the political process because it seemed a million miles away from me. And that's for someone who's actually interested in the news, I was interested, I was aware, but I had no connection at all to the political process. And so for me, that would have been amazing. I would have loved to participate in a program like that, and I think it would have maybe shaped the course of my life a little bit differently. And I want to again put to rest the idea that this can happen absent an election. And I think that there are enough teachers in this chamber, we've heard from teachers who have said over and over and over again, it's that kind of embodied learning. It's that real-time simulation. That's how we learn. That's how we learn as humans. I believe the government knows this. Certainly we know it. And I also think I could take this opportunity to say that no teachers, whether or not they have an interest in politics, have come out in favor of this date. One has. Oh, okay, one has, I hear, but no one that oh, right, sorry. A few of the government members, notwithstanding, but none of the teachers that we've heard from in the public have come out in favor of this date. And I want to say something also to this question of engagement, and particularly engagement of young people around not just do we see ourselves in politics, can we engage in politics, can we be a part of this process one day, do we have a role, but also the reputation of politics. So I have had a very short political career, 4.5 years, and even in that time, I have seen a shift in the way people regard politicians, in the way that we're spoken about, in the way that we're spoken to. And I really do believe that, and at this point, we're all going to say this so many times, but I think it bears repeating, we make really big decisions here. We make really big decisions here. And, you know, my mentor, who was one of my professors in law school, and one of the reasons that I ended up thinking about a career in politics, and I've spoken about this before, you know, said once to our class of constitutional law, you know, how many of you think you might run for office one day? And nobody raised their hand. And you know, this was a crop of folks who you'd think might be considering that career. And, you know, his words have like stuck in my head to this day. And what he said is like, we ignore politics at our peril. Because whether or not you want to get your hands dirty, the decisions get made there. And so you can be a part of them or not. And the more that the reputation, our individual reputations, the reputation of the work we do, the ways in which we conduct the work that we do in this chamber, the more that that suffers, the more that we all suffer. Because when we do have that next election, whether it's in July or whenever it is, who's going to run for us? Who's going to want to put their name forward? There are already so many barriers, and as politicians, of course, we don't like to talk about this because we know that we have so many constituents and there are so many people in this province who suffer, and that we live such relatively privileged lives. But often, compared to our peers or folks in our own profession, you know, we make sacrifices in this job. We don't see our family as much. We travel a lot. You know, there are a lot of things that some of us give up to do this job, and give up quite willingly and without complaint. But it is a tough job. And it can be a really tough job. And I think it's so important that actually one of the responsibilities we all have is to show up in this place in a way that is worthy of respect. That we respect each other, that we respect the process, that we respect the legislation. And again, you know, our big concern with this bill is that it doesn't make any sense. Like, there are a lot of bills I can guarantee in the next 4 years that I'm going to stand up here and just rail against the government about. I know it to be true. I hope it's not, but I'm betting that it is. But many of those bills will be centered around an ideological premise with which I disagree. So the government may want to privatize a bunch of stuff. I don't really think privatizing is the answer, but I'm going to respect the government's right to have that opinion because it is logical, it is thought out, and it is consistent with their basic view of how the province should be run. I mean, maybe it's not, but that's just an example. But this one, like, what is this bill about? What is July 15th about? Try as the government may, we have yet to hear a single compelling reason why we would be the only jurisdiction in this country to have a July election. Why the government would not have considered approaching the Elections Commission. It just defies logic. And so, my great fear is, Madam Chair, that if this bill passes as written, as many have said, it will engender apathy. So we have a low voter turnout, a very low voter turnout, and I again want to kind of register, in the words of my colleague, our leader, some concern over the Premier's earlier comment in the second reading that we had a pretty good turnout in July, in August rather. Like, it's not a good turnout. And I would like, this isn't enhanced, but I'd like the record to show, like, let's pretend it's enhanced. We'll say it again in third reading, that 55% is an abysmal turnout. It is abysmal. And logically, if we don't take that to be true, if we argue that 55% is a pretty good turnout, then in effect what we are saying is that it is just fine for those of us to take these seats, the seat for Dartmouth South, the seat for Halifax Chebucto, the seat for Cape Breton Centre, Whitney Pier, without actually representing without our own constituents having had a say in who represents them in this House, because these are not our seats. These seats belong to our communities, and it should be our overriding goal that our communities have the opportunity to decide who sits in them. Yes. And this bill does the opposite. It engenders apathy. It makes it one on a long list of things to do with your summer. Voting. And I heard this. You know, like we would go to the door and we would say, you know, hi, have you voted today? And they would say, oh, yeah. I'm gonna vote. I gotta pick up the kids from camp, and then, you know, we're heading to the cottage this weekend, and then for sure I'm gonna vote. And that's not the way we want to think about voting. As the member for Bedford South spoke about, you know, sometimes I spoke to a former Page a couple of years ago, and I said, oh, like, how do you like the work? And he said, you know, I'm not so into it. He said, I'm a political science student, and I did a year away in a country that was really struggling with democracy, and I got really engaged with this fight for democracy. And to be honest, like, the stuff that you guys talk about is boring. Like, it's gravy, basically, right? Like, we're fine. Like, I'm gonna go fight the big battles, because these are the little battles and we're fine. But you know, I think we need to keep fighting the little battles. I think that's our job. And again, that is in the name of safeguarding the progress that we've made. And those who have been in the chamber longer than me will know that even the way that we conduct ourselves in this chamber, it changes. It changes. Sometimes you do things a certain way, and then sometimes you do things a different way. And, you know, I've been through 2 speakers and 3 clerks, and everybody has different ways of doing things. And so we need to safeguard our democracy. And I know that that sounds a little bit hyperbolic, but I really think it's true. I really think that in the middle of July, people aren't thinking about getting engaged with voting. They aren't thinking about getting engaged with an election. People are stressed out. Like, I don't know about you guys, but I am, like, stressed out. I really, you know, I have 3 kids. They have like 5,000 extracurricular activities. My husband works full time. I'm here. Like, life is busy. And it's really busy for a lot of people. And it's a lot busier and a lot more precarious for most than it is for me. And it's my job to pay attention to what happens here. But that's not the case for most people. It's not a job, it's a hobby. And I think, you know, what we want to do is not engender apathy, but to combat it. Yes. And, you know, when the leader of the Green Party came and spoke at Law Amendments, and I don't have the answer for that, but I'll get it and I'll table it. You know, she spoke about how, in her experience in BC politics, she said, oh my goodness, the BC Electoral Commission would never, ever advise on a summer election date because they take so seriously their mandate to encourage voter turnout. That is, that's so core to their mission that they wouldn't ever think to do anything as a commission that would harm that. And so it is strange, Madam Chair, that we find ourselves in the first session of the, first mandate of this government, first bill number 1, fixing a problem and then creating a new one. And I really think that this issue is something that we will be dealing with for a long time to come. And I also want to note that back to that Law Amendments Committee, and we have 2 opportunities to change a bill. And I will say that many people have contacted me about this bill, advocating, and I have said to them what I always say to people, which is, this is the legislative process. This shows that I now am totally, definitely a dork. But I describe the whole legislative process. This is the legislative process. First there's law amendments, and then there's committee of the whole House on bills. And in theory, this is where the sausage gets made. And this is maybe where the magic happens. This whole process right here, what we're doing right now, we're making law, right? We're making law. And we are bringing the voices of our constituents into this chamber to determine the best structure of our laws. And this is a bad structure. And back to the Election Commission, I will say that, it is odd that at Law Amendments, we had 1 submission in favor of this date. It was not, I think it's important to say, from the Chief Electoral Officer.
No, it wasn't.
Nor from his second in command.
No, it was there.
It was from a staffer.
Yes, it
And I'm not casting any aspersions on Ms. Shelton. I mean, she came and said her piece, and that's fine. But it is very strange, to my original point, that we have an elections commission in this province. Not only was that commission, I'm not going to say misled because that's unparliamentary, but what I am going to say is that that elections commission was told on October 7th that there was a consideration or plan being researched around spring versus fall, right? Spring versus fall. And so we go from that on October 7th to a bill, a piece of legislation, a piece of governance that not only doesn't say spring or fall, says summer, in just a matter of a couple of weeks. And so we are left with no opportunity but to question why. And I would say I hope we hear, but I am convinced that there is no compelling reason. I think there are reasons. I think we've heard some excuses, maybe. But as for a compelling rationale for a July 15th date, not only have we not heard it, but I would submit it doesn't exist. And to that end, I would say that what we need to do with our legislation, particularly our legislation that concerns our democracy and our democratic governance, of which the Elections Act is maybe the main example, is we need to combat apathy. We need to engender participation. We need to work as hard as we can as legislators to ensure that these seats that we sit in, genuinely represent the members of our community that put us here. And at 55% of the vote, and I'll slip in a little dig that we got in the last summer election.
The hour of adjournment has arrived. Debate is adjourned with with what? Date is adjourned with 3611 left for the honourable member for Dartmouth South. The committee will now rise and report its business to the